Hi, everyone. We just wanted to begin our time today with a land acknowledgement, and just um, wanted to also share again the website where you can look up um, what Indigenous lands you are currently residing on, traveling to. I really love to always do it, especially when I'm in natural, like outside. Anytime I go somewhere and I'm outside and it's not Chicago, I like to look it up. So you can do that there. Today I did that as well. Um, in Chicago right now in Rogers Park, and on the lands of the Miami, Potawatomi, Kaskaskia, Peoria, and Kickapoo. And I wanted to share also a poem by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, who actually is a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. And I think it really speaks to the reciprocal relationship that is the way to grow ourselves and like a healthier environment. And yeah, so I'm going to read that. Here it is. Know the ways of the ones who take care of you so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half. Leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. So hopefully that also can frame our time together as we also harvest ideas and continue to grow this community with each other.
Thanks, Elisa. I will just share our light agenda for today, which is to go a bit deeper into some other definitions, in which we will name explicitly and notice instances of particular racism. And this says affinity groups, but it'll be more like affinity pairings. So just you and another partner, as we dig into, before we dig into some practice. Yes, thank you, Sarah, in the chat. So we are renaming ourselves for this affinity affinity, what's the word? We've done this already today, y'all, and here we are. So J, if you identify as a Black person, O, if you identify as non-Black POC, and Y, if you identify as a white person. This will help us in some affinity pairings in just a bit here. Thank you for that ask. Great. We've got it multiple times in the chat. And then just quickly a reminder of our values that we are offering in the space. So call AAA when you need it, right? That's about accountability, and that equals apology and action, that it takes multiple steps. That we are calling in relationship as a way to continue to do this work and be in this work and in this journey with each other. That we can only heal things once we sort of dig in and uncover the harms and uncover the things within ourselves, right, that need to be healed. And that we are centering the Black radical imagination in this, so honoring the folks whose work have brought us here, whose thought and whose legacy, and the continued practitioners, right, who help to make space for these conversations in the world.
Awesome. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about our accountability buddies, and then Nick's going to take us into the logistics. But as we've said, we're going to pair folks based on racial affinity groups. I'm also, this is radical transparency right now too. I'm like, I just got internet. So I'm nervous that it's not going to work. So if anyone doesn't hear me or needs me to slow down or anything, let me know. I was just like, let me acknowledge this like anxiety about my internet. So I'll talk a little bit about the accountability buddies, which is to say, they are sort of affinity groups and groupings, pairings are sort of one thing we want to offer. We have found them helpful in having conversations that are about racism, in particular anti-Black racism, because we all have different work to do, and some of that changes based on, much of it changes, I would say, based on racial identity and also just like how we show up in the world, how we navigate the world. So just offering it as a tool, we're going to see how it works for folks, and certainly not the only tool. Want to also say that we recognize that people of color or POC, non-Black POC, is like super broad, and that POC is like inclusive of many races, many ethnicities, many cultures, and you know, in an ideal world, we might have many more facilitators, so that we could get very specific about where we are coming from. Unfortunately, we don't have that today, but I do think that it's important to say that even though non-Black POC sort of says like what, I'll include myself because I'm the facilitator for that, that it doesn't say like what I am. It does share by that phrase non-Black. I do think that that's useful when we're talking specifically about anti-Black racism, and that's not something that I directly experience, and so or I engage with it in a different kind of way, right? And so yeah, I want to say that. And then the last thing that I want to say is that we're ideally continuing this work, right? And so I have my own journey of being like, okay, who are the people that I need to have conversations about race and racism with, right? And so as someone who does identify as non-Black POC and who is light-skinned and white passing and have my own journey around whiteness, and is Puerto Rican, I have found places like Colectivo Bambula and Radio Caña Negra who do groups and training specifically for people like me, and that is important work for us to do as well. So I want to encourage folks to like continue to find their people, and hopefully this is, you know, one point in the journey, and I think that's it.
Thanks, Elisa. Yeah, and then we have just a couple of sort of housekeeping logistics to share with you related to how we're going to be doing some of this accountability buddy work. The first is that we have created a list that attempts to pair you with someone who shares a racial affinity with you based on what y'all have identified for yourselves. And that as a part of that list, we've included emails, okay, that we hope to share at the end of our session today, but we only want to share them with your permission, all right? So if you have any issue whatsoever with your email being shared with the folks in this Zoom room, you can private message Elisa directly during this session and let us know like, yeah, I'm not so cool with that, all right? And we'll ask you for a different way to be able to put you in touch and in contact with your accountability buddy. We're also asking that folks not like include all the emails that we're sharing in this space as a part of like every listserv you want to send people up for, right? That we're just using it to put you in contact with your accountability buddy. You're adults, you know this. That was an adultist thing to say. Young people might also know how to respect folks' email contacts, right? So there's that. And then the second thing just is that we acknowledge that y'all have also likely been in community with each other before gathering in this Zoom room and in this way and space. So if there is anyone on the list or in the room who you'd prefer, and in your affinity group specifically, who you'd prefer not to be paired with for any reason, that you can also direct message Elisa, and we'll make sure that we get you paired with folks that you feel super comfortable and right and aligned with. You are going to be doing some intimate and deep work together in between now and the next time that we gather. So we just want to make sure that you feel good about who you're paired with to do that work. So I think that's it. Again, Elisa is the person to direct message if you have an issue with with us sharing your email, or if you have a preference about not getting paired with any particular person. And yeah, thank you for lifting that up, Quenna. There will also be an opt-in contact sheet later on for general sharing contact information.
Okay, time for buddies?
I think so.
So this is not necessarily the person that you are going to be talking with, over the week. But we would love for you to get into a pair and just share two things. One is a thing you remember about how you played as a child. And then the second is a time when an identity you rarely think about came to light related to your admin work or related to your teaching artist work, if you've been a teaching artist or an educator before, yeah? Perfect.
We are going to define a couple of words together and do a little bit of work around them. So unconscious bias, microaggressions and interpersonal racism, and institutional racism. And the offer is that this time we stay in the full group, and we'll sort of process a bit later in our affinity spaces, and try to identify sort of how they show up specifically right in our organizational practices, and a little bit later identify barriers that we navigate because of these. I think that's all I want to say right now.
Thanks, Quenna. Yeah, so we're going to start thinking about and moving through a collective definition of unconscious bias, which really refers to the multiple ways that we reactively respond to the stories that we have been told about each other, right? So these are our kind of knee-jerk reactions, our internalized assumptions that have been programmed into us through a number of different means, right? Through media sources, through family and social contexts, and through everybody who gets stories into us as children growing up, and then as we move through the world now. It also refers to the often silent landscape that microaggressions and racism thrive on. So really that our behaviors, the ways that racism and white supremacy get enacted in the world, are based in and rooted into unconscious bias. And so part of the work that we're doing here together today is really about making those internalized assumptions conscious, coming into contact with them, examining them together so that actually we can uproot them. And lastly, that these are the learned beliefs and behaviors about a particular race that result in harmful behaviors against that race. So I'm going to share just a couple examples through some research studies that many of you may have come into contact with in the past with your previous work or in other sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces. And also just to sort of name and complicate that what I'm sharing as examples here are research studies, right? And that often in order to prove the existence of racism, especially for white audiences, this kind of data is like needed. So I want to complicate that and also just name that like the proof is here. And it's also the proof is in this Zoom room and in the lived experiences that people are having of how unconscious bias shows up. So the first research study is really an example of the ways in which this shows up in labor and hiring practices. So there's a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research called "Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal?" And this was really, it was an experiment where hundreds of responses to a job call, actually in a Chicago newspaper, were made from researchers with nearly basically identical resumes, right? Half of which the researchers submitted with white sounding or white passing names, and then half of which the researchers submitted with black sounding or black passing names. And the sort of response or the results of the research are not good, right? That 50% more callbacks were made to white sounding names than to the black sounding ones. And so we can just see how then unconscious bias really starts to impact hiring practices, of course, opportunities to earn income and to accelerate in one's career in really, really damaging ways. And then if we locate this a little bit more squarely kind of in your own work and in education spaces, there's another research study related to essays and the ways that essays and sort of student work are graded amongst teachers. So in this case, hundreds of essays were submitted amongst researchers attached to a name from the student and then a racial identity marker. So that researchers submitted essays that were indicated as being from white students, from Latino students, and then from Black students. And the white student essays were graded amongst this consortium of teachers more harshly, but were given more critical feedback, right? And then the essays from the students of color that were graded less harshly, so were given higher grades, but were given less feedback, okay? So what that signals to students of color is your less quality work is adequate or meets my expectations for you, right? And so we can just see how that kind of unconscious bias then could create a landscape in which the education gap actually allows, it sort of gets bigger and bigger. So there's just a couple of examples of how this might be showing up in, education spaces and beyond. And we're going to take a moment to locate them much more specifically in the organization spaces that y'all are navigating. Okay. So we're going to drop a link in the chat here to an ideas board. And the ideas board has 3 different lanes that we're going to be moving through together. And we're going to stay in the first lane for now as we think through examples. And just before we drop this in, I want to just mention that if, again, this is not serving, in particular, the Black folks in the room, to think through specific examples of how unconscious bias shows up in your organizational spaces, this will take about 5 minutes. So good opportunity for a bio break if you want it. Otherwise, we will we'll drop some of these examples into the ideas board now. And
walk us through it.
Yeah, please, please, please. So I'm going to pull it up here and then I'll do some screen sharing because it was actually my first time using an ideas board. Thanks to Quenna who taught me the tool. So this is it here. And what you're going to do is use this little green plus button to add an example of your own, right? So that'll pull up a Post-it note and you can put your example really specifically. Again, we'll stay in the unconscious bias lane for now, and we'll be walking through microaggressions and the habits of white supremacy as we get to those definitions in just a moment here.
The next one here is microaggressions, right? Because the attitudes and beliefs that we just listed lead to action. That's how they come up in the form of microaggressions. So one definition that we have for that is, I've been timing it so well with Nick's screen sharing capacities. The everyday slights, indignities, put downs, and insults that people of color, women, LGBTQ people, and others who are marginalized experience in their everyday lives, right? And this sort of definition offering coming from Daryl Wing Su. And again, right, that these are the visible manifestations of unconscious bias. And as is in the word, they are often unconsciously enacted, right? And because of that, they are often minimized, but deeply impactful, right, to the folks who are experiencing them. I won't do too much more explaining here. I will invite Nick to share a video instead that we have found useful. And just to say, right, that all of these are tools that hopefully you all can continue to use in your own practice and journey, but as well as like in your own learning spaces, right, with your staff, with your students. So the ideas board is a tool, right? Like I borrowed that from Nicole. These videos, everything that we are sharing, right? We hope is helpful to you in a number of contexts.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I
touch
touch it,
your hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
I really want to give money to those people. It's just such a really poignant way to sort of talk about this seemingly tiny thing, right? But that has real impacts on folks' lives. Sorry. Yeah. Oof, it gets me every time. But sort of just watching it again, thinking about how many times have I heard many of the things, right, that have happened in that video, or more that weren't even listed. I shared this earlier, but recently several folks who I went to high school with, right, at a predominantly Black school on the south side of Chicago, started this conversation about how our college counselor really disserviced us, right, and disserviced them. And so they ended up in these trajectories that they would not have gone down, right, because they received this guidance couched and embedded in these racist beliefs. So just to call that out. Okay, so the invitation is to breathe as we head back to our idea board and continue to list out how we see these coming up, right, in our spaces, in our educational spaces, and in our organizational spaces. So that middle column.
We're gonna talk about one more thing in our trio of concepts today, which is institutional racism. Also, of course, related to the habits of white supremacy, which we're about to go into. But wanted to bring up this quote from Auguste Boal. We love it because he's also a theater practitioner. So using art, of course, to be getting at some of these concepts. The smallest incidents of our social life contain all the moral and political values of society, all its structures of domination and power, all its mechanisms of oppression. So I think that's really great because it threads us through all the things we've been talking about today. So wanted to just show you this beautiful, it's not beautiful, it really sucks, this list of the habits of white supremacy so that you can see it. We're assuming that folks were able to do the homework to, look through that document for more details, but here they all are. And we're going to take a moment to talk about vote, I guess, for what you feel is the habit of white supremacy that really is the most salient, dangerous in your work. And I think it would be really nice for us to think specifically about organizational culture. Since y'all are admins. So Nick is gonna, I guess you don't really need to teach us how to do this, huh? Or do you want to say?
It sort of says it at the top here, but I guess lack of being overly redundant, the invitation is just to go to the link at the top of this screen, so menti.com, and you can either do this on your phone or on your computer right now. It'll ask you for a code just to get into this poll so that we can actually collectively take a diagnostic of which of these habits of white supremacy culture are most overactive in the organizations that y'all are moving in. And we'll be able to see that poll populate now live as we all vote into it, as we're starting to see. So take a moment just to do that on your phone or your computer, and we'll just see how these habits show up in all of the spaces that y'all move through.